David Staples here from the Edmonton Journal. The Allan inquiry report is out. The long-awaited Allan report is out. The Allan report is a public inquiry into anti-Alberta oil and gas campaigns. Came up in the last 15 years. Before we get into what Allan found, I'm just going to answer some questions. The main questions about this whole issue. The first one that comes up is, where were we about 15, 20 years ago in terms of what we thought of the environmental movement? And back then, I think we thought it was it was the little guy against Goliath. It was a real seen as a grassroots movement of farmers, environmentalists, fighting against the big money, the big dollars of often US run oil companies. Behind the scenes, the environmental movement started to get really, really organized and started to get big dollars backing it. So in 2006, the Alberta Enterprise Group staged a big event in Washington, D.C., and they had the big oil patch, the big Fort McMurray trucks down there. And it actually kind of backfired. It alarmed people in the United States about the ambition of the oil sands backers. And, just these big trucks really got people's attention, but maybe in the wrong way. And they decided to get organized. And they started what they call the tar sands campaign, to kind of demonize Alberta oil. And one of the things the Allan inquiry found was, they described it, this large and complex campaign would involve grassroots campaigns, the development of documentaries and research papers, divestment campaigns to convince people not to invest in oil sands, direct action, citizen engagement, land conservation initiatives. So this was to get these huge nature preserves in BC, off the coast, in the middle of BC, anywhere where they wanted to put a pipeline, put a big nature preserve, and you can stop that pipeline. It would involve litigation, political activism, achieving legal precedents based on the rights of First Nations people. Now, this isn't me saying this. This is the finding of the public inquiry, and this is the real value of this public inquiry, is that someone, with the authority of an independent investigator like Steve Allan has now come up with findings. He also found, looking at the documents of the tar sands campaign, that this was going to it would need to be, they thought, highly coordinated. And then they made a really damning admission. Although it was going to be highly coordinated, they said, quote, "The coordination center shall remain invisible to the outside." So they were going to pay for all this stuff, take their money from these big US foundations, funnel it to Canadian grassroots organizations, but it was all going to be a secret. That no one was supposed to know that this huge transfer of money was going on. And thus it was so. It was so for a few years. They started up 2007, 2008, and it wasn't until 2011 that researcher Vivian Krause, who had seen this same kind of funding scheme in the salmon industry in British Columbia, she noticed, what's going on here? There was a few things that she was digging into, information that twigged her that there seemed to be a lot of money going to these Canadian green groups from US funding agencies. She started to raise a stink about it. And, it was always seen like, is this real? Like, is she right? Is she wrong? Who is this Vivian Krause? What does she know? Like, what's her angle? And lots of questions about her. She gained more and more credibility as, she backed everything she had with a paper trail. And it became a big political issue, to the point that in 1 year later, by 2012, the Canadian Senate had a hearing. And they brought a couple Tides executives there, and Senator Daniel Lang asked them, point blank, what are you guys up to? Are you against oil and gas? And the answer at that time from Marin Smith, who was the director of the Tides Canada Energy Initiative, was, quote, when she was asked if they're anti-oil and gas, "Our organization has not taken a position." So think about that. Does that square with, the goals of the tar sands campaign and the people who were involved in that. The smoking gun that Vivian Krause eventually found came when she found some. It was I think it was about 2017, and she found something from a guy called Michael Marx, who was he was the driving force and organizer of the tar sands campaign, and he was bragging at that point at the success that his group had. And by then, I think Energy East was dead. They had stopped Northern Gateway. They had successfully stopped a number of Canadian pipelines. And Michael Marx trumpeted on his website, quote, "From the very beginning, the campaign's strategy was to landlock the tar sands so their crude could not reach the international market where it could fetch a high price per barrel. This meant national and grassroots organizing to block all proposed pipelines." So we went from a situation where it was just the little guy trying to get the oil and gas companies to have better environmental practices in Alberta to clean up their act. And we need that. We need environmentalists to fight that fight. And they also, all along, environmentalists were fighting against climate change, hoping to reduce energy consumption, energy production. But from there, from the little guy fighting on those issues, it became this much bigger thing, well coordinated, highly coordinated, well funded, uh, all out offensive, all out blitzkrieg, and with the one goal of, as Michael Marx boasted, of landlocking the tar sands, as he put it, to block all proposed pipelines. And you know, maybe this is the right thing to do. But it started to strike some Canadians as unfair. Albertans as unfair because still building pipelines like crazy in the States. What's still building pipelines like crazy in Saudi Arabia and Russia? Where's the campaign against Saudi Arabia? Where's the campaign against U.S. oil? Where's the campaign against Russia? We just seem like an easy target. We were the ones because Canada actually responds to justified issues. We were the easy target because we actually give a hoot about global warming. We would take action, but nobody else would. Trump's America didn't. Um, Obama boasted about how America was the number one oil producer. Um, the Saudi Arabians and the Russians, the Venezuelans. Do you think they're going to take some action? No. It started to strike people as this isn't really fair that we're being targeted like this. And now there's also this, there's this huge difference between how the environmentalists have always presented themselves and who they really are. So what is going on here? How much money are they getting? Who's giving them the money? And who are these American foundations? What's their angle? Do they have any ties to business? And I should say that's a question. No one knew. Like, who's backing them? Like, is there some kind of, because what we'd seen in California, and this is well documented by Michael Schellenberger in the California Environmentalist, that there has been one industry, one kind of energy industry, like the oil companies funding environmental groups to shut down another kind of energy industry, such as nuclear. So that kind of thing has gone on. Was this part of the equation here? Nobody knew. So this was what the inquiry was all about, to get to the bottom of these questions and uncover what was going on. So what did we find out? Well, it's a little bit disappointing, honestly, that Steve Allan's commission wasn't able to get to the bottom of this, but they weren't. What they found was there's about $1 billion that's gone from 2003 to 2019 from American sources into Canadian green initiatives. Most of that money is completely benign. It's groups like Ducks Unlimited that do a lot of good work. But he was able to actually, from the documents themselves, from people saying explicitly, even though they were trying to keep everything secret, he found explicitly there was about $54 million that went explicitly to shut down the oil sands, to anti-Alberta oil and gas initiatives. That's what was openly admitted. Now, it's probably more than that. And it's more than that if you include these nature preserves, the money that went into creating these nature preserves off the northwest, protecting the water off the northwest BC coast, the Great Bear Rainforest, the Great Boreal Forest Preserve in Alberta that they're trying to get in place. Like all of these things had a lot of funding as well. Allan, quite cautiously and I think prudently, doesn't include that in the $54 million, I don't believe, from my reading of the report. It's a 656-page report. I'm still working my way through it. I suspect most people are. It's just been out a day. I mean, it's like the War and Peace of reports here. So because these financial relationships are so opaque, because a group will get a money and it's not exactly clear what they're using it for. It's not really known necessarily. They might use it for this, that, and the other thing. He couldn't really get to the bottom, Allan, of how much money went into this campaign to shut down the oil sands. And what he's calling for is more transparency for the non-governmental organizations, for the green groups, for the indigenous groups to get this money, to have better reporting, to kind of meet the same standard that the oil companies and all other corporations meet in terms of governance, in terms of transparency with the public. I actually think this is something that the green groups should embrace. They will be questioned and they will be judged and they will be doubted until we know who's funding them, how much money they're getting. They should be completely transparent about that. They should welcome this kind of thing as something that will improve their credibility. Because right now, they went from the little guy fighting Goliath to kind of this secret force fighting Goliath. Maybe it was Goliath versus Goliath. We don't even know. Who knows? But they're getting money. They're getting paid to say what they're saying. And the Alberta government, Energy Minister Sonia Savage is presenting this as like, they're kind of hired guns at this point. They spoke out on this. They're paid to speak out on this. What's next? What are they going to speak out against next? Is it going to be modular nuclear reactors? The answer to climate change. We finally have. We've had it with nuclear power for a long time, and it's coming back in a big way with modular nuclear reactors. Well, is this going to get smeared in some crazy way? With dark money that we don't know where it's coming from. Hydrogen. We're creating hydrogen with natural gas in Alberta. Is that going to get a big campaign against it? So, when people get paid, it changes things in terms of, are they willing to compromise? Are they willing to be reasonable? So we need to know where they're getting their money from. And it's in their interest. It's in everybody's interest that kind of transparency is there. So this is what's come out of the Allan inquiry. Some people wonder if it was worth the money. It's like, listen, anytime you can get more information and credible information, I think that's a really good investment. And we know a lot more about the whole anti-Alberta oil and gas movement now. We know a little bit more about how to deal with the problem. And we also know that it's not David versus Goliath. It's much more like Goliath versus Goliath. And there's various interests at play here, and we got to think about all of those interests. And it would be good if we knew them. It would be good if there was transparency and that kind of thing was made public. Alrighty. Thanks a lot.